I wanted to say good morning, but this is not morning, is it? Well, let me say this first. I wish you knew how glad I am to be here. Just to be in this building, to be a part of North Heights. And I appreciate so much the invitation to have a part in your Vacation Bible School. Night before last, when I was here, it was perfectly evident to me that the elders and the preachers and a lot of folks deserve to be congratulated and thanked for a lot of hard work. Things like this doesn't happen just by accident. Somebody has to do something. And that was very evident to my mind. And the one commodity that was here in abundance, and you can't have a Vacation Bible School without it, kids. What a wonderful bunch of children you have here at North Heights. You ought to be thankful. You ought to be that, and I hope, and I think you are. If the church here has a future, I believe with all my heart that it's in the children, it's in the little ones. So make sure that you do what you can to help them grow up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord and be strong men and women in the faith. Couldn't do a better thing. And now we're going to talk a little about Moses. I like Vacation Bible School because it's a little less formal than regular service, or I think it is. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I'd like to see somebody raise their hand and answer it. When you hear the name Moses, what comes first to your mind? Don't tell me nothing. Beg pardon? Crossing the Red Sea. Amen. Amen. What an event. Took 2 million Israelites across the Red Sea as by dry land. Now that doesn't happen every day. What else? Say it again. Oh, yeah. Deliverer, right. In that delivery, he became a type of Christ. As Moses delivered the Israelites from physical slavery in Egypt, Christ delivers all of us from the burden of sin here in this world. Moses truly said unto the fathers, a prophet shall the Lord your God raise up like unto me, and I'll put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak them all that I've commanded him. Talking about Christ. What a prophecy. What a prophecy. I have a new translation here. Some of you may already have one. If you don't, I wish you'd get one. No, I don't think it's perfect, but it's easy to read. And that's one of the reasons why I have it. They tried to translate this on about a fourth grade level, fourth grade vocabulary, and that suits me just fine. It's called the Contemporary English Version, and it was translated and published by the International Bible Society. And I want to read pretty much without comment. I may have to stop and say something. A part of Stephen's speech. Stephen, the first martyr, you remember, right? Yeah. And he was speaking here to a large number of angry Jews. And as things wore on, the madder they got. And at the end of the service, they stoned the old boy to death. Think about that. But you will not find a better lesson of concerning Jewish history than Stephen's speech that he made to those angry Jews here recorded in Acts 7. I'm going to read a part of that, so just listen. Just listen. I'll begin with verse 20. During this time, Moses was born. He was a very beautiful child, and for 3 months his parents took care of him in their own home. Then when they were forced to leave him outside, the king's daughter found him and raised him as her own son. Moses was given the best education in Egypt. He was a strong man and a powerful speaker. When Moses was 40 years old, he wanted to help the Israelites because they were his own people. One day he saw an Egyptian taskmaker mistreating one of them. So he rescued the man and killed the Israelite, or killed the Egyptian. Moses thought the rest of the people would realize that God was going to use him to set them free, but they didn't understand. And Moses' work was so greatly hindered because those people were so slow to understand and accept the fact that he was God's appointed leader. The next day, Moses saw 2 of his own people fighting, and he tried to make them stop. He said, "Men, you're both Israelites. Why are you so cruel to each other?" But the man who had started the fight pushed Moses aside and asked, "Who made you our ruler and judge? Are you going to kill me just like you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" When Moses heard this, he ran away to live in the country of Midian. His 2 sons were born there. 40 years later, by the way, are you picking up on how fast we're moving? 40 years. 40 years later, an angel appeared to Moses from a burning bush in the desert of Mount Sinai. Moses was surprised by what he saw. He went closer to get a better look. And the Lord said, "I am the God who was worshipped by your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Moses started shaking all over and didn't dare to look at the bush. The Lord said to him, "Take off your sandals. The place where you're standing is holy. With my own eyes I have seen the suffering of my people in Egypt. I have heard their groans and have come down to rescue them. Now I send you back to Egypt." This was the same Moses that the people rejected by saying, "Who made you our leader or judge?" God's angel had spoken to Moses from the bush, and God had even sent an angel to help Moses rescue the people and be their leader. In Egypt, at the Red Sea, and in the desert, Moses rescued the people by working miracles and wonders for 40 years. 40 years again. Moses' life was divided into 3 parts, each one 40 years. So Moses was 120 when he died. He died being permitted to see the promised land, but he wasn't allowed to go because, remember, he struck the rock and said, "You rebels, shall I fetch you water out of this rock?" That enraged God. He took credit for himself. So he wasn't allowed to enter the promised land, but he did get to see it. And he died there, and God buried him. Moses is the one who told the people of Israel, "God will choose one of your people," and that now is Jesus, "to be a prophet, just as he has chosen me." Moses brought our people together in the desert, and he spake to him at Mount Sinai. There he was given these life-giving words to pass on to us. But our ancestors refused to obey Moses. They rejected him and wanted to go back to Egypt. The story of Moses, if you're really interested in it, and I hope you are, you need to read the Exodus. You need to read the Exodus. It's mainly about Moses. And it's a marvelous book and so interesting to read. Gives you all the details. And I have such respect for Moses. Moses endured. I think Moses endured what very few men that have ever lived would have endured. He led those people when they were belly aching, pardon the expression. I don't know of a better word than this as I'm using it. They complained constantly. Remember when they complained about the food? This is just one of the incidents, but hear it. They were sick and tired of that manna. They wanted meat. And God blew in the quail, and as best I can figure, based on the information that I have access to, the quail covered the ground about half knee deep, all over the face of the earth. And they had quite a feast. They had quite a feast. And the record says that while the flesh was yet between their teeth, they were belly aching again. Complaining again. While the flesh, they didn't even get their teeth picked till they were whining again about something. But Moses remained faithful to God. In fact, the only mistake that I know of any consequence that he made was when they had no water. They were starving for a drink. And God told Moses to speak to the rock. And Moses smote the rock with his staff 3 times and said, "You rebel, shall I fetch you water out of this rock?" And because he took the credit for himself, God was very unhappy. And God told him then and there, for this you're not going to the promised land. And he almost attempted to argue a little with God, but God quelled that rather fast and said, don't want to hear any more. We'll hear no more. As I said already, he didn't get to go to the promised land, but he did see it afar off. And what a story that is. Moses is one of a few in God's Hall of Fame. You know what the Hall of Fame, God's Hall of Fame is? Hebrews 11. Let me read you a few verses here. By faith Moses, when he came to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasure of Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense reward. By faith he, that's Moses, forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who was invisible. Through faith he kept the Passover, and the he here again in Moses, and the sprinkling of the blood, as he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. By faith he passed through the Red Sea by dry land, which the Egyptians are saying to do were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down. And Moses has just been replaced by Joshua at this point in time. So that's the end of Moses. Now let's go back over some of this and with a few details. See, I've got a lot of notes. But I'm not going to keep you here till midnight. Let somebody fall out the window. Moses was born in Egypt 1,530 years before Jesus was born. Long time ago. 1,530 years. When Moses was born, Israel had been in Egypt about 300 years. And they had multiplied like crazy, as the saying goes. They had a lot of kids. And Pharaoh got nervous because the population among the Israelites was increasing so fast. And Pharaoh gave an order to the Egyptian midwives. These were ladies who assisted the Israelite ladies in bearing children. And I would paraphrase here. If it's a boy, take him out. If it's a boy, kill him. That's what that means. And Moses was born during that time. Moses was a good-looking kid, believe you me. So he was a handsome young man. They kept him at home for 3 months. And I couldn't help but wonder, did he progress and get crying so loud they couldn't muffle him down, so they had to do something with him? So they built an improvised ark from bulrushes, put him in it, took him down to the Nile River and hid him among the flags in the Nile River. Who do you guess is up on the hill watching? Da 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 da. Mama. And when Pharaoh's daughter and her maids found him and they took him, Moses' mother knew what had happened. And anyway, here's one of the greatest examples of the providence of God that I know of in this book. His own mother wound up being his nursemaid and raised him really in the house of Pharaoh, with him growing up as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. If I know mamas, and I think I do, I had one that I couldn't forget if I tried. When he grew up a little bit, I can just almost hear her saying, "Son, you're not an Egyptian. You're my boy. You're my boy. You're one of God's children. You're an Israelite. You're not one of this bunch." Grew up with his mother as his nursemaid. When he was growing, he'd come to years, and by the way, I think that means when he was 40 years old, he visited his people. And he saw this Egyptian slave master. By the way, Israel were slaves in Egypt. And they made brick. And somehow that just sounds like work to me. They made brick. So when he visited his people, he saw one of the Egyptian taskmakers beating an Israeli laborer. And Moses got in on the action. And he killed that Egyptian and buried him in the sand. The next day he went back to visit them again, and two of his own brethren were fighting. And he made them a little speech. Why are you fighting? You're brethren. You're brethren. And the one I think that cranked up the fight, the one who was responsible, said, "Who do you think you are, our judge, our leader? Will you kill me as you did the Egyptian yesterday?" Now Moses is very much grown. The first 40 years of his life has been lived. And he's had experiences that are unbelievable. He went to Midian. That's another country. He went to Midian. Jethro was a prominent man in Midian. And Jethro had, I believe, 3 daughters. Moses married one of them and had 2 children by her. he became a shepherd for Jethro. In fact, the next 40 years is spent living in Midian, working for Jethro. And about this time, Aaron enters the picture. Moses and Aaron, remember? Moses returns to Egypt with Aaron. Now God is back in the picture big time and tell him, go and deliver my people. So Moses and Aaron went back to Egypt, and they went to Pharaoh, eye to eye. Let my people go was the message. Let my people go. Well, you know, if you know anything at all about this, you know how Pharaoh responded to that. The Lord says that his heart was hardened, and the answer was no, not going, not going. And then the miracles began, plagues, flies, frogs, boils, and finally the death of the firstborn in every family, including Pharaoh, the firstborn among cattle. This got the old boy's attention. And I can understand that. This got his attention. And he let them go. Now, Moses is 80 years old, and Aaron's 83. After the death of the firstborn, Israel escaped from slavery. They crossed the Red Sea. Have you thought about that? They crossed the Red Sea as by dry land. And God rolled that water back and it congealed. It stood up. Have you ever seen any water stand up? That's the answer to that question. The water stood up literally. A wall of water here and a wall of water here. And dry land here. And the Israelites, by the way, there's only about 2 million of them now. They crossed the Red Sea as by dry land. No incident. But Pharaoh's army was in hot pursuit. And here they came and they went in after them. And something that I find hilarious happened. Of course, I do a little paraphrasing along. They got out there, I don't know how far, but the wheels began falling off their wagons and their chariots. And I've always thought God took the wheels off their wagons. And that crippled them big time. They did manage to get across, but they didn't manage to get across. They all drowned there in the Red Sea. What a story. Shortly thereafter, they came to a place called Kadesh Barnea. And from Kadesh, he sent the spies out to search the land. And I find this just really interesting. They went and searched the land, and they came back. 10 of them said, get this, we can't do it. Those people looked at us like we were grasshoppers, and that's exactly the way we felt about ourselves. We can't possess that land. Caleb and Joshua, the other 12 spies went. 10 said we can't do it. Caleb and Joshua said, let's go at once and possess it. We're full well able to possess the land. But the majority, here's an example of the majority ruling. And they didn't go. And that angered God. God doesn't appreciate disobedience. And God fully intended to take care of them. And he would have taken care of them very well. But that's not what happened. You know what happened, I think. They wandered the next 40 years in the wilderness. Moses leading them, or at least attempting to. In process of time, God called Moses up on Mount Sinai. Up to now, there was no written law. And now we have the 10 Commandments, or the Decalogue, as it's called. Moses went up on the mount to receive the law. The people were left with Aaron. And Moses was gone 40 days. Why to stay? And the people, they wanted to worship. And they really commanded Aaron to make them a god. You know what Aaron did? Made them a god. Took their gold, took their earrings and their rings, and they melted it down, and they fashioned a calf, a golden calf. Moses comes back with the law written on 2 tables of stone. And the people are worshiping their image, already become idolaters. They worship their image, but that's not quite all the story. They were naked. Put off all their clothes, and they're worshiping the golden calf. How do you suppose Moses handled that? Not very well. Not very well. What happened to the tables of stone? Moses threw them down and they were broken. What a story. Moses went back on the mount again, got a new set of tablets. But this time, he also got numerous other rules and laws to govern the people. The people became idolaters. During this time, they made the Tabernacle. That was a sacred tent, remember? Made out of animal skins. Put it up. And it was replaced by the temple in the days of Solomon. And here the story pretty much ends. God has told Moses that he can see the promised land, but he's not going. So God takes him up on a mountain, shows him the promised land, and Moses died, and God buried him. Exactly where, nobody knows. Nobody knows. I meant to say this at the beginning, and I may have because I'm so rattle-brained these days. I would put Moses in one of the 3 top men of the Old Testament. The other 2 would be Abraham and David. The three top men in Old Testament history, I would say, would be Abraham, Moses, and David. And I think studying these men, as I've tried to present some information concerning Moses, I think that's so needed. We are not very well informed at all in Old Testament stories and Old Testament history. Of course, we are New Testament people. But I read a verse that said, all Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, reproof, correction, instruction, and righteousness. Will you believe it if I should tell you that when I grew up, which was a while back, my grandfather, my mother's father, advised me to stay out of the Old Testament. You don't need to read that. We don't live back there. That's history. That's why you don't need to read that. And consequently, of course, I thought he hung the moon, being my granddad. And in the early part of my life, I didn't study the Old Testament. And I'm not as well versed in it as I'd like to be. But I heard an old preacher one time say this, and I remembered it. The Old Testament is the New Testament concealed. The New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. And that is a wonderful statement because it's true. The Old Testament is the New Testament concealed, and the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. And we'll read it read both Testaments remembering that. It'll become so much more meaningful to us. And so much more. Well, I don't know if the time's up or not, but I'm out of breath. Let me share one more thing before I sit down. I never thought about my voice getting tired until just a few short years ago. Pretty much the last year and a half. But when you pass 90 years old, everything gets tired. And this has been a long day. It's been a long day. Nita and I were up this morning at 5 o'clock. This was my day to go to John 3, which I went. Enjoyed my class tremendously. I have 91 men out there now. All drug addicts and alcoholics. But I must say this about this man. That's the most attentive class I've ever taught. Every man has his Bible and has it open to what we're studying, and I just go down the page with them. That's about the only way I know how to do it. And not as many, but I've been doing this for about 8 years now. And a lot of them take notes. A few years ago, there was a fella, and they all sat in the same place every time, same chair. Folding chair, we have a class in the kitchen, and that kitchen's full. And this gentleman was to my left, immediately to my left. Always had this Bible open, always had his notebook, and I could read his notes. And he had better notes than I did. And that's not saying too much. But anyway, he graduated and went home. Lived down in South Arkansas. I wish I'd remembered his name, but I didn't. Anyway, I guess, a couple years ago, Nita, I got the letter from him. Yeah. He was thanking me for all that I did for him and for all the boys out there, the things that I had taught them. And he said, you know, we weren't Christians then, but said, my wife and I are now Christians, and we never miss a service. That lights your fire, doesn't it? Yeah. If I just had a little bit of part in that, thank God. Thank God. Well, have a good evening, and I love all of you.